Chinese outboard motors now hold nearly 20% of the global market share, up from just 3% 5 years ago. American and Japanese brands that dominated for decades are watching their dealerships close, while budget-conscious buyers flock to names most boaters have never heard of. The marine industry is facing a shift nobody predicted, and it is happening faster than anyone thought possible. Why are established brands losing ground to manufacturers most people cannot pronounce? What changed to make boaters trust engines from factories that did not exist a decade ago? Stick around, because what is driving this takeover might completely change how you think about your next outboard purchase. For nearly a century, three names ruled the outboard motor world. Mercury, Yamaha, and Honda built reputations on reliability and performance. These brands earned trust through decades of engineering refinement and warranty support. A Mercury 4-stroke or Yamaha Fab 6 became the gold standard. Dealers trained mechanics for years on these systems. Parts networks stretched across every coastal state and lakefront town. The price reflected this dominance. A new 200-horsepower outboard from a major brand could easily cost $18,000 or more. Routine maintenance required factory-trained technicians and genuine parts that came with premium price tags. Most boaters accepted this cost as the price of quality. The marine industry operated on an unspoken rule that you paid top dollar for established names, or you risked catastrophic failure miles offshore. This system worked because alternatives barely existed. Small Chinese manufacturers made cheap trolling motors or tiny two-strokes for fishing boats in developing markets. Nobody considered them serious competition. The technology gap seemed insurmountable. American and Japanese engineering represented generations of research and testing that could not be replicated quickly. The barrier to entry looked impossible to cross. That confidence created blind spots. While legacy brands focused on incremental improvements and maintaining margins, a completely different strategy was forming across the Pacific. Between 2018 and 2023, Chinese outboard manufacturers invested over $4 billion in research and production capacity. Companies like Parsun, Hidea, and Suzhou Parsun hired engineers who previously worked for Yamaha and Mercury. They studied every patent filing and reverse-engineered proven designs. Manufacturing plants in Guangdong province started producing outboards with computerized quality control that matched or exceeded traditional standards. The shift happened quietly. These factories already supplied components to major brands. Aluminum castings, electronic control modules, and fuel injection systems often came from the same Chinese suppliers used by American companies. The manufacturers simply integrated vertically. Instead of selling parts to Mercury, they started building complete engines under their own names. Distribution networks developed rapidly. Chinese brands partnered with online retailers and discount marine outlets. They offered warranties that seemed impossible at their price points. A 150 horsepower, 4-stroke that would cost $14,000 from Yamaha sold for $6,500 under a Chinese brand name. The specs looked identical on paper. Displacement, fuel injection, and electronic throttle control all matched legacy designs. Early adopters were skeptical but curious. YouTube channels started testing these engines. Fishing guides in Florida and charter operators in the Gulf began running them on backup boats. The results surprised everyone. Fuel efficiency matched the major brands. Reliability proved acceptable for most applications. Service intervals were standard, the engines worked. Chinese manufacturers had closed the technology gap faster than anyone predicted, and they did it by leveraging the same global supply chains that fed the established brands. A charter fishing operation in Destin, Florida, became an unlikely proving ground. Captain Mike Torres ran 6 boats, each powered by twin Yamaha 225 horsepower outboards. Annual maintenance costs approached $35,000. Engine replacements every 8 to 10 years meant constant capital expenses. In 2022, Torres took a calculated risk. He repowered one boat with Chinese-built Parsun outboards. Total cost, including installation, was $11,000 compared to $38,000 for equivalent Yamahas. The first season brought expected skepticism from customers. Passengers questioned the unfamiliar brand. Torres explained the decision honestly and offered discounted rates on that boat. He tracked every metric obsessively. Fuel consumption matched the Yamaha boats within 2%. Engine performance felt identical in rough seas. The electronic controls responded smoothly. No major issues emerged through 200 operating hours. By season 2, Torres repowered a second boat. Word spread through the charter community. Other captains started asking questions. The Parsun engines completed full seasons without failures. Routine maintenance proved straightforward. Parts arrived from domestic warehouses within days. The warranty claims process worked smoothly on minor issues. Torres calculated he saved $68,000 across 2 boats without measurable performance loss. His operation became a case study that circulated through marine industry forums. The success story validated what many boaters suspected. Chinese outboards had reached a tipping point. They were no longer cheap alternatives for people who could not afford better. They represented a legitimate value proposition that forced uncomfortable questions about brand premiums and actual performance differences. The pandemic created an unexpected catalyst. Boat sales exploded as people sought outdoor recreation. Established manufacturers faced supply chain chaos. Mercury and Yamaha could not keep up with demand. Lead times stretched to 18 months. Dealers had waiting lists for engines. Frustrated buyers searched for alternatives. Chinese manufacturers ramped up production rapidly. Their supply chains proved more flexible. Engines that normally took 12 weeks to order arrived in 4. Dealers who never considered Chinese brands started stocking them to fill gaps. What began as a temporary solution became permanent shelf space. Buyers who would have waited for Mercury or Yamaha decided to try the cheaper alternative. Many were pleasantly surprised. Sales volume created momentum. Between 2020 and 2023, Chinese outboard imports to the United States increased by 340%. Distribution networks expanded beyond discount outlets into mainstream marine retailers. Some dealerships created separate service departments specifically for Asian imports. Marketing budgets increased. Trade show presence grew. The brands invested heavily in American-facing customer service and technical support. This boom phase normalized Chinese outboards in the American market. Each satisfied customer became a testimonial. Online reviews accumulated. YouTube channels documented long-term reliability. The social proof multiplied faster than traditional advertising ever could. Established brands watched market share erode, but maintained their premium pricing strategy. They believed brand loyalty would hold. They assumed buyers would return to proven names once supply chains normalized. That assumption proved costly. Many buyers who switched never came back. The false boom became a permanent market restructuring. Established manufacturers faced a financial trap of their own making. Decades of premium pricing created bloated cost structures. Engineering departments, executive salaries, and dealer support networks all assumed high margins. When Chinese competitors entered at half the price, the math stopped working. Mercury Marine could not simply drop prices by 40% without devastating profitability. Dealers felt the squeeze immediately. Floor plan financing for inventory became expensive as interest rates climbed from 2% to 8% in just 2 years. A dealer carrying $300,000 in Yamaha outboard inventory now paid $24,000 annually in interest costs. Meanwhile, Chinese brands offered better payment terms and consignment arrangements that reduced dealer risk. The used market complicated everything. Resale values for major brands started softening. Buyers questioned whether a 5-year-old Mercury worth $12,000 made sense when a new Chinese engine cost $8,000. This value compression rippled backward through the market. Dealers took bigger losses on trade-ins. Boat owners found their equity evaporating faster than expected. Manufacturing facilities faced utilization problems. Yamaha's Georgia plant and Mercury's Wisconsin operations ran below capacity. Fixed costs spread across fewer units meant per engine costs increased exactly when competition demanded lower prices. Some brands responded with incentive programs and dealer rebates. These tactics bought time but eroded margins further. The debt spiral tightened, market share losses accelerated, Chinese manufacturers gained momentum while legacy brands struggled to adapt their business models to a new competitive reality that nobody had prepared for. Modern outboards carry sophisticated electronics. Fuel injection systems use dozens of sensors. Electronic throttle control requires proprietary software. Digital displays integrate with GPS and fish finders. This complexity created a service advantage for established brands with extensive dealer networks and trained technicians. Or so everyone thought. Chinese manufacturers made a strategic choice. They used off-the-shelf electronic components and open-source diagnostic protocols. A mechanic could access engine data with standard OBD to scan tools instead of proprietary dealer equipment that cost thousands of dollars. Wiring harnesses used color-coded standards. Parts catalogs were detailed and publicly available. Service manuals came in clear English. This approach lowered the barrier for independent mechanics and do-it-yourself owners. Major brands built intentional complexity into their service model. Dealer networks required expensive certification programs. Diagnostic software required annual licensing fees of $3,000 or more. This created revenue streams, but it also locked customers into authorized service centers. When those service centers had 6-week backlogs, frustrated owners sought alternatives. The technology gap worked both ways. Chinese engines lacked some advanced features like adaptive trim control or integrated joystick steering, but most buyers never used those features. They wanted reliable power at a fair price. Simplicity became an advantage rather than a limitation. Repair costs stayed manageable because parts were not artificially expensive. Module replacement on a Parsun fuel injection system might cost $400 compared to $1,200 for an equivalent Mercury part. This accessibility eroded another competitive moat. The complexity that once protected market share became a vulnerability. Mercury Marine still holds a dominant market position in high-performance applications. Bass tournament anglers and offshore racing teams remain loyal. The brand commands 42% market share in engines above 300 horsepower. But volume sales in the 100 to 200 horsepower range dropped 11% since 2021. Chinese competitors captured most of that lost ground. Yamaha maintains a strong presence in pontoon and recreational segments. Its reliability reputation keeps many buyers committed despite higher prices. Market share in mid-range engines declined from 31% to 24% over 3 years. The brand faces particular pressure in freshwater markets where service access matters less than initial cost. Saltwater applications show more loyalty due to corrosion resistance concerns. Honda struggles most visibly. The brand entered the outboard market late and never achieved the dominance it enjoys in automotive. Chinese manufacturers specifically targeted Honda's position by offering nearly identical engine configurations at steep discounts. Honda's North American outboard sales dropped by 19% since 2022. Some analysts question the brand's long-term commitment to the segment. Suzuki occupies an interesting middle ground, Japanese engineering but more aggressive pricing than Mercury or Yamaha. The brand holds steady at roughly 8% market share. Chinese competition pushes from below, while Mercury maintains pressure from above. Suzuki's survival depends on defending its value position. Chinese brands now collectively represent 17 to 20% of annual outboard sales in North America. Parsun leads with roughly 6% individual market share. Hidea, Suzhou Parsun, and Tohatsu branded Chinese engines account for the remainder. Growth trajectories suggest they could reach 30% within 3 years if current trends continue. Real boaters face genuine decisions. A fishing guide in Louisiana recently needed to repower his 24-foot center console. 2 Yamaha 200 horsepower engines would cost $42,000 installed. Equivalent Chinese outboards cost $17,000. The $35,000 difference represented 6 months of revenue. He chose the Chinese engines and invested the savings into boat upgrades. 12 months later, the decision looks smart. The engines perform flawlessly. A retired couple in Michigan planned to replace the single outboard on their pontoon boat. The Mercury dealer quoted $11,000. Their fixed income made that price difficult. They found a Parsun for $4,800. Installation added $1,200. The total stayed under $6,000. They took their grandchildren fishing all summer without mechanical issues. The experience changed their perception of brand value completely. Young families entering boating faced the sharpest choices. A new father in Texas wanted a fishing boat but struggled with the cost. Chinese outboards made boat ownership possible within his budget. He accepted the risk that resale value might suffer. His priority was getting on the water now while his kids were young. The calculation worked. 3 years later, he upgraded to a bigger boat and repowered with another Chinese engine. Brand loyalty never developed with legacy manufacturers because their pricing kept him out of the market entirely. These individual decisions multiply across millions of boaters. Each person who chooses a Chinese outboard and has a positive experience influences friends and family. The network effect accelerates adoption. Legacy brands lose not just sales, but future customer pipelines. Marine service departments face an identity crisis. Technicians trained exclusively on Mercury and Yamaha systems suddenly see unfamiliar Chinese engines rolling into service bays. Some shops refuse to work on them. Others recognize a business opportunity. Independent mechanics without dealer affiliations increasingly stock Chinese parts and advertise expertise in Asian imports. This shift fragments the service landscape. Marina storage lots reveal the trend visually. 5 years ago, almost every outboard wore familiar brand badges. Today, Chinese logos appear on 20 to 30% of engines in many facilities. This concentration varies by region. Gulf Coast marinas show higher adoption rates than New England. Freshwater markets convert faster than saltwater. The geographic pattern follows price sensitivity and risk tolerance. Parts distributors scrambled to adapt. Warehouse networks built around Mercury and Yamaha inventory suddenly needed shelf space for multiple Chinese brands with different part numbering systems. Some distributors resisted, hoping the trend would fade. Others created separate divisions specifically for Asian imports. The market fragmentation increased operational complexity for everyone. Small shops face tough decisions about inventory investment. Coastal economies feel secondary effects. Towns built around recreational boating depend on consistent sales and service volume. Chinese outboards disrupt this ecosystem. Lower price points mean lower sales commissions. Simpler service requirements reduce maintenance revenue. Dealer networks shrink. Employment contracts. The economic impact concentrates in communities where marine industries represent significant job bases. The transformation happens quietly, but reshapes local economies in ways that extend far beyond individual purchase decisions. The reset scenario offers hope for established brands. Quality concerns with Chinese engines could emerge at scale. Corrosion issues in saltwater might appear after 5 years. Warranty support could deteriorate as companies face financial pressure. Parts availability might decline. These problems would validate the premium pricing of legacy brands. Market share would stabilize. The industry would return to a familiar equilibrium, with Chinese brands occupying a budget niche but not threatening core markets. Several indicators support this path. Recent tariff discussions could increase Chinese engine costs by 15 to 25%. Supply chain disruptions from geopolitical tensions might interrupt parts flows. Mercury and Yamaha are investing in automation to reduce manufacturing costs. New models aim to close the price gap without sacrificing quality. Dealer networks remain advantages that Chinese brands struggle to replicate. Customer service infrastructure takes decades to build. This reset requires patience but seems plausible. The reckoning scenario suggests permanent market restructuring. Chinese manufacturers continue improving quality while maintaining cost advantages. They invest in American service networks and parts distribution. Brand perception shifts from cheap alternative to smart choice. Market share reaches 35 to 40% within 5 years. Several legacy brands exit the outboard market entirely. Consolidation reduces American and Japanese manufacturers to 2 or 3 survivors. The marine industry undergoes the same transformation that reshaped consumer electronics, power tools, and automotive markets. Both futures depend on choices made in the next 18 months. Established brands must either dramatically lower costs or accept smaller market positions. Chinese manufacturers must maintain quality and expand support networks. Buyers will ultimately decide through millions of individual purchase decisions. Watch dealer inventory levels carefully. If established brands maintain high floor plan stock, despite slow sales, they are betting on market recovery. If inventory drops sharply, brands are retreating from segments they cannot defend profitably. Current data shows Mercury and Yamaha reducing dealer allocations by 12 to 15%. This defensive posture suggests they expect continued pressure. Monitor warranty claim rates. Chinese engines need to maintain failure rates below 3% to sustain growth. Any spike above 5% would trigger buyer skepticism and slow adoption. Industry data through 2024 shows claim rates holding steady around 2.8%. This reliability validates the value proposition but bears watching closely. Track parts availability timelines. Chinese brands promise 3 to 5 day delivery on common components. If this slips to 2 or 3 weeks, the service advantage disappears. Mercury and Yamaha still maintain 1 to 2 day parts delivery in most regions. This remains a competitive strength if Chinese networks cannot match it consistently. Observe pricing trends. If Chinese manufacturers raise prices significantly to improve margins, the cost advantage narrows. Current models maintain 40 to 50% discounts. Any move above 30% discount brings established brands back into consideration for price-sensitive buyers. Regional adoption rates tell the story. Markets that reach 30% Chinese share rarely reverse. Momentum becomes self-sustaining. Florida Gulf Coast already exceeds 28%. Texas approaches 25%. These markets likely cross the tipping point soon. Northern and saltwater markets lag below 15%. The geographic spread indicates how adoption patterns develop. Evening light reflects off a quiet marina. Dozens of boats rest on their lifts, engines tilted up waiting for tomorrow. The badges on those engines tell a story about changing markets and shifting power. Chinese characters appear next to familiar American and Japanese logos. The transformation happened so gradually that nobody noticed until it was done. Legacy brands that dominated for generations now share space with competitors they once dismissed. Buyers voted with their wallets. The marine industry will never return to the old order. The takeover was not hostile or sudden, it was economic and inevitable. When established brands priced themselves beyond reach, alternatives emerged to fill the gap. Chinese manufacturers delivered acceptable quality at accessible prices. The market responded rationally. Now the industry faces permanent restructuring. Brand loyalty erodes. Competitive advantages disappear. New winners emerge. The quiet revolution reshaped the outboard market while most people focused elsewhere. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe to Fleet Watch for more coverage of the marine industry's biggest shifts. The transformation is far from over.